Okay, it's 12:01, so we will call the meeting to order. It's the 17th meeting of the Corporate Services Committee. And this is a virtual meeting, of course, during the COVID emergency. Please check the city website for current details of COVID-19 service impacts. And as always, this meeting can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. I will first look to members of committee to see if there are disclosures of pecuniary interests. And I'll go to you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, on item 2.1, the Council Compensation Review Task Force, one of the 5 candidates is my direct supervisor at Western University, so I will declare a conflict on that.
Thank you. Any other conflicts? Seeing none, I will let the committee know that there's been a request to change the order of the agenda, and that we would put the additional business item at the start of the meeting. So I have no objections to that, and I'll look to committee to see if there are any. Okay, I see a thumbs up, and everybody's good with that. Perfect. So we will go straight to additional business, and I will go to visiting member, Councillor Squire. Welcome, Councillor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Committee. This is a difficult day for me in a couple of ways. On Friday, October 8th, I was advised by the Chair of the Consent and Capacity Board that by order in Council, I have been appointed as a member of that board, which I'm extremely proud of, that I'm being given that opportunity. The difficulty with that opportunity is it disentitles me from sitting as a member of Council. Effective the date of the order in Council. That is unfortunate, but that is the fact. So the clerk will be able to advise you, as she was aware on Friday. I waited until today till I received the actual documentation with the order in Council. I was advised by the chair of the board at that time that I could not continue to sit as a member of Municipal Council. So the clerk will deal with that. My position now is that I have ceased to be a member of Council and will cease all activities as a member of Council as of the date of October 7th, 2021. On a personal note, this is a decision that's being made for my family, myself, my profession, the things I stand for, and the things that I value. It's a difficult choice, but it's a choice that makes sense for me. And I'm extremely honored to be assuming this position and continue to work in the area that I'm most passionate about, which is adjudication in matters of people with mental disabilities. So with that, I am going to leave. And I want to just say that I leave here completely happy with having been on City Council. The ups, the downs, the sideways, the disagreements, all of it has passed me. And I will take the opportunity soon to reach out to all of you personally. But this is a strange day for me, but it's one that is brought about. So thank you for that time. The reason I wanted to come today was because I know you're going to be debating issues of vacancies of councillors, and it seemed very strange to me that I wouldn't provide you at least with this information. Please keep in mind that I didn't learn about this. This isn't the kind of thing you know about for a long time. I literally found out 4 o'clock on Friday, got the documentation at 11:20 this morning, and drove down to City Hall to do this. So I want to thank the committee for letting me speak. And again, I will reach out personally to speak to all of you. And I'm gonna leave right now. I don't think it's appropriate that I stay.
Well, Councillor, I wonder if you might stay 30 seconds because I'm sure that there may be some comments directed at you and you. And
oh no, I'm not going to stay for that.
Good ones. I'm assuming that they are good ones.
That's fine. I'll stay for that.
Thank you, Councillor. And you don't have to stand at committee, but I appreciate you doing so.
I wanted to stand.
And I saw the mayor raised his hand, so I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thanks very much. Huge news, and congratulations, Councillor Squire. Listen, I think it's appropriate in the spirit of what we've done in the past to bring you back at a broader, with a broader council to be able to extend their best wishes to you as well, and you can finally say all the things you wanted to say to the group as a whole, and I think that's, again, totally appropriate. But it is sad. Happy for you, and I think sad for us, your contributions, your counsel, your fierce opinions, and loyalty to your ward and to our city. But we'll have that chance, I think, Chair, to be able to say even nicer things about Councillor Squire a little bit later on. But I know I say on behalf of all council, at least certainly in this very short term, that we wish you every happiness and success and best wish in that endeavor. It sounds very exciting for you and for your family. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else? Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Well, I was completely unprepared for this, but I felt like as Councillor Squire's seatmate over on this side of the horseshoe, I should say something, because I think over the past couple of terms, I've really enjoyed to get to know you better, Councillor Squire, or former Councillor Squire, as you just indicated. And I think, during that course of time, what I have appreciated most about our relationship is we may stand up and have differences of opinions. You may stand up and blast me. I may blast you back. And we walk out of the hallway of these chambers, and we'd shake hands or we'd go have a beer together, and things are fine. And I always appreciated that we could do that we could debate vigorously, we could have differences of opinions, and we could go out and we could enjoy each other's company in a different forum. And I think that's really one of the best things about municipal politics, and you brought that to the table for me. I won't regret you using the term a la carte budgeting or some other stuff that you've given to me, but I will remember, though, the fond memories of debating together. And I will think, this is all very new news for me, but I did want to say I really did enjoy our time together. And I really did regret that we didn't have the opportunity during the pandemic to sit beside each other and share each other's company as much this term as we did last term. So I wish you very much all the best, Phil, and we'll connect outside the meeting, and I'll have lots to say then. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Lewis, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'll stand to a little taller. I'm going to get that in one last time. Thank you for recognizing me as a guest at committee. Obviously, this is surprising news to everybody. I will have lots of nice things to say about Councillor Squire later. I just wanted to wish him all the best, congratulate him on this appointment, and say the one upside to this is it will now make it a little less awkward when your partner refers to me as her favorite councillor.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Van Holst.
Well, Councillor Squire, I'll be very brief. You will be missed. Thank you for all you've done.
Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. And I will just say, I'm flabbergasted. I was not expecting this kind of announcement today. I remember many debates with Councillor Squire. And one that stands out is on the radio. We were both shocked to learn that we had been co-booked on the radio together on opposing sides of an issue. And after the fact, here in this building, I remember reaching out to Phil and saying, you know that I didn't know ahead of time, right? And he said, yes, I know you did not know ahead of time. We were both sort of surprised by that, to see each other sitting in the booth together. But he did say, you held your own on that one. And it was quite a fiery debate, if I do recall correctly. So there were a lot of those around this horseshoe, and I will say that your constituents have been very well served by you. So thank you for coming today and making this announcement. Congratulations on this appointment, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you. Do we need a motion to receive that information, Madam Clerk? We may have a few motions.
Madam Chair, it's Kathy Saunders.
Go ahead.
I wasn't sure which clerk you were referring to, so
my apologies.
That's okay. So there may be a number of motions, including declaring the seat vacant. I did prepare a report. It's very similar to filling the vacancy report that you have before you today for Ward 13, which I can share, or it's up to the committee if they want to deal with that report today, or as they're dealing with the Ward 13, or if they want to do it separately at a special meeting. If you could just advise what the committee's desire is, that would be helpful. But at the very least, you could entertain a motion to recommend to council that the ward's seat office be declared vacant.
I look to committee. I personally feel like the councillor has tendered his resignation today with us. Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
I'm prepared to declare the seat held by Councillor Squire, Ward 6 vacant.
And it is seconded by Councillor Van Holst. Do we need to see your report, Madam Clerk? Or how do we handle that?
I can circulate it to the committee, so you can see. Unfortunately, it wouldn't. I wasn't able to provide it beforehand because we're not aware of when this would be taking place. So I can certainly circulate it. It's very similar, almost identical to the report before you regarding Ward 13, where you would need to consider how you wish to move forward with the appointment. Filling the seat, whether it's through an appointment process or a by-election process. The only thing different in the report is the reasons for the ineligibility is different between the Ward 13 vacancy and the Ward 6 vacancy. So you may want to declare it at this point, and then I don't know if you want to have a concurrent discussion when you're talking about the report related to Ward 13. But I can certainly send you the report right now by email, if you wish.
Sure. Oh, go ahead.
Oops, Deputy Mayor, I turned it off and then I spoke.
Yes, Chair, I'm interested in your opinion on this as well, but I would say if we are to receive a report that I have not read, I would prefer, whether we have a recess, it's not a long report, I'd prefer to read it before actually voting on it, even if it's very similar to the previous one. So I believe, we could have a short recess to all read the report if we feel that that's the way we'd like to go. I think that's the most appropriate course of action rather than receive a report that we haven't read.
Any other, Mr. Mayor?
Well, there's a motion on the floor in terms of that's been duly seconded to declare the seat vacant. I don't see any issue with dealing with that. And then as part of this, if it's the pleasure of committee to deal with the report from the clerk, that can be an additional motion dealt with appropriately.
Okay. We have a motion to declare the seat vacant. It's been moved and seconded. I look to see if there is any discussion on that motion. Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, that motion's carried 5-0.
Thank you. Okay. So the next up would be the clerk's report. Is there a desire to call a short recess while we read that report? And we will need a motion for that too. Councillor Van Holst, do you have, yes, you're moving that. We have a recess. How long will we need? 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes? Okay. So Councillor Van Holst, is 20 minutes good? Is that what you're prepared to move? All right. Okay, that the committee recess for 20 minutes. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Any comments on that motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
Okay, so we will be back at, I think it said, so the clerk is emailing that report to members of council, and we will return at 12:35. Okay, it is 12:35, and so we can call the meeting back to order. I just have to find, there we go. So for members of the public who have tuned in, we just took a brief recess because Councillor Squire made an announcement today, basically stepping down from his position as Ward 6 councillor because he was appointed to a provincial body, which makes it ineligible to sit on that provincial body and also hold the seat of a city councillor. So that is what we are dealing with right now. We took a 20-minute recess because the clerks had quickly adapted a report on how to deal with this vacancy. And the committee members just had 20 minutes to look over this report. It's very similar to the report that was prepared when the seat for the Ward 13 member was declared vacant. So now we have that, and I look to committee to see how we go forward, and I'm going to go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, Chair. You'll note that I moved the motion appropriately seconded by Councillor Van Holst that the office of Councillor of Ward 6 be declared vacant. The recommendation coming through the clerk is similar, except that it adds a point B, which the vacancy of the office of Councillor of Ward 6 be filled by means of appointment on an individual in accordance with Section 263 1A of the Municipal Act 2001. I'm not sure procedurally, Chair. I'm happy to either move B because I think that's consistent with the direction supported by A, but I would look to you and perhaps to the clerk through you as to whether we can append the motion that was previously put on the floor, or we just simply, because I think the wording on this is very clean, very clear, and I think it'd be appropriate that it all be together. So I would look to you for direction as to how we might either append or amend the original motion, which was made prior to this document being circulated.
Well, I think we've already moved A. We already voted and A passed. So the seat has been declared vacant, or the recommendation to council is that the seat be declared vacant. And so we would just deal with part B, whether, and we would have a discussion and debate on that, whether that is the appropriate way to fill that vacancy. And you're willing to move that the vacancy be filled by means of an appointment, by the appointment of an individual?
That's correct, Chair.
And is there a second for that motion? I'm not.
If I may, through you, Madam Chair, is it necessary that we pass a B at this point? And if we don't, will this just come back to us at the next meeting?
There is a timeline. I'll go to the clerk for that, the deputy city clerk.
Thank you, through the chair, and I would invite the city clerk to chime in as well. The timeline for a decision with respect to this will start once council declares the vacancy. It's still a recommendation at this point. So you have the luxury, I would suggest, of a bit of time if that is the desire of committee or the council.
Councillor Van Holst.
Yes, Madam Chair, at this point, I prefer we wait till council to make that decision. This is all happening very quickly, and I don't see the need to make a decision at this point. So I won't be seconding the motion.
Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Oh, there we go. I don't have a problem with the mayor's motion. I think it's going to be dealt with at council anyways. We're going to have a discussion about Ward 13, and I'm of the opinion that I'm comfortable filling that seat by appointment, given the content of the report, which is very similar to this one. So I'm fine seconding the mayor's motion if he wants to declare that. But my understanding of the order of operations is nothing can happen with the Ward 6 seat until council approves that the vacancy was declared. And then we can proceed with filling it by appointment if that's what is approved by council. So I'm fine to second that and have it on the floor for debate and consideration.
Okay. So that's been moved and seconded. I will note that a referral would take precedent, just putting that out there. And I will look to committee and visiting members for discussion, debate on the motion that's on the floor. Yes, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Thanks very much. I just want to concur with the deputy mayor that none of this is official until council makes it official. So what are we doing? We're declaring the seat vacant. That's absolutely clear. The second thing is that we're looking to fill the position vacated by the councillor in Ward 6 by means of an appointment. And again, none of that takes place until the October 26th council meeting as far as next steps. So I hope that council colleagues will support this in the spirit of, rather than pushing it off to council, we're just giving direction as a recommendation to council for consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not seeing any other hands. I have a question for the clerk. For both the appointment process and the by-election process. So the timelines that are in the reports, both reports, and I know we're just dealing with this one right now, speak to, everything is based on the October 26th council meeting date. We also have the option of calling a special meeting of council if we would like to speed things up. If we were to call a special meeting of council, what and knowing what our deadlines and rules are for calling a special meeting, what is the earliest that we could either fill this seat, either seat by appointment or hold a by-election?
Through you, Madam Chair, if council on the 26th was to declare the position vacant and deem a appointment process under the Act, the appointment process requires the appointment to be done within 60 days. If council on October 26th deem that they wish to hold a by-election, in accordance with the regulations, the earliest a by-election could be held is mid-January, given the timeline set out for the nomination period and when the election needs to be held after the nominations close. From many years of experience running an election, I'm not sure how realistic we are about moving it up. The latest we have is 60 days, just because we have to obtain the voters list, get tabulators ready, order ballots, and I'm not sure if we could do that within the minimum time frame set out under the Act, but we would certainly do our best.
Councillor Lewis, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. Through you, I do have a question for the clerk, just for clarity's sake. I'm quite sure that I know what the answer is, but I did want to ask that if a by-election route was pursued, notwithstanding the fact that the sitting members of council were elected under a ranked ballot, that would proceed under a first-past-the-post system, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct.
I have an additional question. The costs that are laid out in this report, that's to have one by-election in one ward. If there were to be 2 wards filled through by-election, would there be any cost savings? Would it be double that cost or would it be one cost to hold both by-elections?
Through you, Madam Chair, I just want to reach out to my staff who have scrambled to get us information very quickly. And we believe that if we're running 2 by-elections, there would be some cost efficiency attained through communications and some of the software costs, because we'd be running the same software for both by-elections. But I'm just trying to pull up that email to tell you. And this is just an estimate on our part, of course.
So while you're getting that, Madam Clerk, I will go to the Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Yes, in an effort to try to be helpful, I think what is happening here is Phil Squire has come as a citizen and let us know this information. We've declared the seat vacant. A lot of us came prepared to talk about the Ward 13 vacancy, and now we're in an awkward situation of having not decided what we're doing with that, because I can tell you, I like consistency with this. I think doing the same thing for 2 vacant ward seats is the same, and it would be, I think, a lot easier if we debated what we all came to be prepared for, and then we flowed the Ward 6 item through the same process, be that appointment or by-election. So I wonder if we're able to have the debate in the order that we kind of prepared for it, and then we could, because the reports are very similar, right? So I just, it feels like everybody's in a very awkward position because no one's ready to kind of talk about what they came prepared to talk about, and we're all trying to decide, if we do this, do we prejudge the other debate that we came here to have in some way? And so I don't know if we can deal with the Ward 6 item separate, since it's the new item, address the Ward 13 item, and then, you know, I would certainly be supportive of whatever the committee's recommendation is on Ward 13, that it be very similar for Ward 6. That's my personal opinion, but I think we've got to get all this out in the air to hear how colleagues feel. A lot of colleagues have shown up to share their opinions at this committee, and I'm very interested in hearing from all of them on that. But I think that's why we feel like we're in a very awkward position right now, is everybody came prepared to debate a certain thing. We got a bit of a curveball thrown, and perhaps if we dealt with this in a different order, it might be much clearer.
Okay, I hear that, and before I do anything with it, I see Councillor Hopkins' hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, for recognizing me. And just to follow up on Deputy Mayor Morgan's comments, I do respect the word that he used, consistency, and I think consistency is really important. I know we're all kind of rallying around having these 2 vacancies now, and how we do one vacancy and do another. I think there's a lot of time and effort that may go into that. And the reality may be, and to make it easier on or maybe the fairness of filling in these vacancies, that we try to do them together. I guess that's a question through you, Madam Chair, to Clerk. Is that a possibility that we can do that without sort of creating more costs, more time, and repeating the same questions and conversations? Is there any way we can have these 2 vacancies done together?
So as sort of like a and B of the same motion is what you're saying, or I'll go to, so okay, go ahead, Councilor.
Yeah, I just would like a comment from the clerk. I understand that council still has to declare the vacancy, but I guess just wanting to see how we can put everything together.
Madam Deputy Clerk, do you have a comment on that? Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, I think, I appreciate where Councillor Hopkins is going. I think there's a couple of slight issues. I think I confused it by trying to support B, which is a very prescriptive approach to filling the seat, when in fact we have not yet decided as it relates to the vacancy, which has now been declared for Ward 13, how that will be dealt with. So I'm going to be withdrawing Part B. I think that's the logical thing to do. So we have already supported the recommendation to council that the Ward 6 seat be declared vacant. So if we take B off the table, which I'm withdrawing now, I think that avoids the potential for confusion. And I think the difference between Ward 13 and Ward 6 is this. Council's already made a determination that the seat is vacant, so now we have two more steps. One is to decide the process by which we select or have a new councillor for Ward 13. And I think the second is just, I think it's a next step, and I think it will have to go ultimately to council to have it declared vacant, and then my sense is the next cycle we deal with that vacancy. So, but what I would imagine is going to happen is that we will be consistent with one versus the other. So whatever process that we use to deal with the councillor for Ward 6, I would imagine, do exactly the same thing in Ward 13. Ward 13 will do the same with Ward 6. Now, if ultimately an election is selected, the only thing I would suggest is that's when it may require a special meeting so that we can tighten up the dates, and we have the ability to do that. That's within our purview. So, I'm hopeful that taking B off the table helps clarify, and then we can get on with ultimately 4.1 at the right time, and then separately deal with the Ward 6 situation that's just been come upon us.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And that actually helps clean things up a little bit too, as far as process goes. So on a very sage advice from the Deputy City Clerk, I'm going to go back to the order of the original agenda. So we'll deal with consent items. We are pulling 2.1 separately. So let us deal with 2.1. There is a conflict declared on that, and that is the Council Compensation Review Task Force. Any comments, questions, or a motion on that item? Deputy Councillor, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I have a question regarding the review. There's a number of things that are involved besides just compensation that are reviewed. I see that, I think in one place it talks about members of council, and then it talks about councillors, whereas the mayor would be a member of council, but not generally considered one of the councillors. Will they be looking into the aspects of the mayor's position as well? And so I guess that's my first question.
Would that be you, Madam Deputy City Clerk, or the City Clerk? Madam City Clerk.
Thank you, Chair. The council passed terms of reference for the 2021 Council Compensation Review Task Force, which is very scoped in nature. And the scoping really, for the most part, just pertains to looking at the median full-time employment income data for Londoners. So it's not a full lengthy review to what we did in 2016. So this is a very scoped review.
Okay. Thank you. So we're expecting a smaller amount of work from this review than the previous one. That's what we're saying, and that's our goal here.
Is that a question for the clerk?
Yes, if
okay.
Just to confirm, this is not the same kind of review that was done previously, but
Madam
an
Clerk?
abbreviated one.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Chair, that's correct. That's what was brought forward in the spring for Council's consideration, and that was what was approved. So this would be a fairly short review process, and we anticipate we would report back fairly quickly on the results because it is scoped.
Okay, thank you. I have another question about this one. Now, we had intended as the governance review committee to look at the issue of how council will be going forward in the next term. And there was especially the issue of moving to daytime meetings and the impact of that. And that may have a big effect on the decision about compensation, or its potential that could have. So I'm concerned that we haven't had that discussion yet. And I think that would be needed before we assign the review task force their mandate. And I'm wondering how soon can we expect that conversation? I thought we would have had it by now, but I guess over the summer we didn't meet. So can I ask about that clarification?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, I apologize. We haven't had a chance to report back on that, but that report is outside of the scope of the terms of reference of the Council Compensation Review Task Force, which was already approved by Council in the spring. But we will do our best to move up the other report for Governance Working Group as soon as we can.
Okay, thank you. And then should there be something that comes from that meeting that impacts on this, on the report that we're requesting now, what would happen? What would happen then? Would we add to the scope of what they've been requested to do here? Or should we simply refer this until those discussions take place?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, respectfully, I think they're two separate and different processes. The task force is simply looking at the compensation, not looking at the governance model of council. But certainly, you know, once the council has looked at the second request that would go through governance working group, they could certainly direct staff to do whatever they wish as a result of that outcome. But the terms of reference for the Council Compensation Review Task Force, which was approved by Council, would not contemplate this.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I don't know that I'm going to support the motion because I would have preferred that we had that conversation. And this is just a situation that seems to have come up more than once, that there's a conversation needs to be had before something else needs to be done. So I think that will be my approach to this item. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll go to you, Councillor Hopkins, and then after that, Councillor Helmer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Are you receiving comments on 2.1 and 2.3? My internet keeps on cutting out, and I wasn't sure if I can make a comment on 2.3 now.
We are only on 2.1.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Helmer.
Thank you very much. Just through the chair, I missed the beginning part of the meeting, so I wasn't able to declare a pecuniary interest on the appointment of Joe Lyons. But in terms of appointing Mr. Lyons, I will be teaching the course in the local government program starting in January. And so Mr. Lyons would be my supervisor in that program, and I'll have to declare a pecuniary interest on the appointment of him to this panel.
Is that the same conflict as yours, Deputy Mayor? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Your conflict is duly noted, Councillor Helmer. Okay. Okay. So there's a recommendation in the report here. Councillor Van Holst has decided that he's not sure if he's going to support the recommendation.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
Happy to support, move the recommendation that the individuals on the list shown for the 2021 Council Compensation Review Task Force be ratified.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Pelosi, go ahead.
I'm happy to second that.
Thank you. I do have a question, and I know Councillor Van Holst asked some things similar, but I do have a question for the clerk, and it is regarding a review or adding at some point, perhaps not at this point in time, but at a future time, to add the mayor's office as part of the compensation review task force purview or scope of work. How would we go about adding that? Or should we strike a separate task force to review the compensation of at the office of the mayor? Madam Clerk, what are your thoughts on that?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just trying to find the previous recommendation from the 2016 Council Compensation Review Task Force, and I believe they may have looked at the mayor's position, but I'd have to go back and take a look at that. I mean, the task force will just be looking at the median income. I suppose, I mean, the terms of reference has been approved, so it's a decided matter of council, but you could reconsider if you wanted us to add the mayor's office to that review, since it's very scoped, or you certainly could direct us to do a separate process for the mayor's office in the future.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And on a separate note, so the council compensation is change or goes up every January based on inflation and cost of living, et cetera. Does the mayor's salary as well follow that? Just for clarification.
I don't have it in front of me, but I believe it's for all members of council.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so the mayor has moved the recommendation from staff on the council compensation review. It's been seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Are there any other comments that people would like to make? Any discussion, debate? I'm not seeing any. So I will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 3-1 with 1 recused.
That takes us to 2.2 and 2.3 combined because nobody has called for those separately. So we're dealing with the remainder of the consent items. Do I have a mover and seconder for the remainder of the consent items? Moved by Councillor Pelosa and seconded by the mayor. Do you, any discussion on those items? I see Councillor Hopkins. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to just make a comment regarding the report that you have in front of you on the 2021 Association of Municipalities Ontario Conference that was held here virtually. London was the host. And I just want to say that we met with a number of ministerial delegations and they were very successful. We met with housing, economic development, health, mental health, education, environment. And we were at that table with the ministers, highlighting the unique London solutions, but also the importance of community needs and opportunities and working with the province that is so important to municipalities. I want to just thank all the members of council that attended the conference. I want to thank city staff for being there and supporting us. And I also want to thank the community members who worked hard to make London's presence recognized as the host on this at this conference. One of the emails I received from the president of AMO at the conference was how much he enjoyed listening to the music scene in London as he was dealing with all his emails. And I really think that highlighted the great work and the community support for making this a success. And hopefully we'll be able to see one another in 2023 when it comes to London. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Counselor, and thank you for all the work you do on our behalf at AMO. It is extremely valuable work, and they are an extremely valuable organization to municipalities across Ontario, and especially to London. So thank you for that. I'm looking for any other discussion on the remaining 2 consent items, and I'm seeing none. So I will call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
To 4.1, which is the filling of vacancies on municipal council. And I am at the hands of committee. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, while there's, I'm sure, different opinions on how best to proceed with regard to the seat vacant now in Ward 13, I think all of us involved should be able to agree on one thing, and we must focus on arriving at the best solution based on the options that are available and based on the circumstances that are imposed upon us. In fact, it's been magnified by today's most recent announcement from the councillor from Ward 6. So, from the outset, we've been presented with 2 choices. Either appoint an individual to serve the residents of Ward 13 or hold a by-election. Under the current circumstances, I'm totally opposed to holding a by-election for a variety of reasons. First, the people of Ward 13 have been without a municipal representative since mid-August, when then Councillor Kabaga properly took a leave of absence to focus on her federal campaign. As noted in the staff report, if we choose to hold a by-election, the vacancy will not be filled until early February of next year. That's 6 months without representation in Ward 13. In addition to that, staff have told us that a by-election could cost upwards of $180,000, while more importantly, straining resources required to prepare for the regular municipal election that will be held just months later. I don't believe a by-election under these circumstances is in the best interests of our citizens. And for those who might ascribe a political motivation to that, I would note our staff, in this case the clerk's office, neutral and apolitical by definition, have also recommended against holding a by-election. I concur and would recommend we fill this vacancy by way of appointment. Under the circumstances and based on the information available to us, I'm in support of nominating John Fife Miller to serve as the councillor of Ward 13 for the duration of the term of council, and I'd like to share with you why. This council, as you know, was the first in Ontario history to use ranked ballot in the 2018 municipal election. We fought like hell to reinstate it when the province opted to remove the option for 2022, and while we were unsuccessful in doing so, all of us supported the notion of ranked ballots. Why would we cease to support that now? Using ranked ballots in which voters rank multiple candidates by order of preference, Mr. Fife Miller finished a close second to former Councillor Kabaga. That matters. He had nearly twice as much support as the 3rd place finisher. What also matters is his commitment to the people and small business in Ward 13, his ongoing commitment to the community, and his continuous community involvement between campaign cycles. That's evidenced by his extensive resume, his participation on numerous boards and committees, and most importantly by the dozens of unsolicited letters supporting his appointment from Ward 13 residents attached in our communications, as well as downtown business owners. And that support for Mr. Fife Miller is not along party lines, nor is it based on political ideology. I look at the variety of names and diverse representation of the individuals who support Mr. Fife Miller. And colleagues, let's say this. I hope you agree that our best option, given all the information available to us, and in light of the circumstances, is to move swiftly on this appointment and to appoint Mr. Fife Miller to represent the constituents of Ward 13. The issues facing our downtown are too significant to go without representation for 6 months, especially when a ranked ballot system, along with present-day endorsements, make clear the strength of his appeal to those he'd be tasked to serve. By the way, should Mr. Fife Miller seek re-election in the fall of next year, he will be held accountable by voters and will be forced to run on his record, just like all of us. I don't see that as a bad thing. While we cannot mandate it one way or another, I frankly prefer the option of appointing someone who will face the electorate next fall and be accountable for the decisions made, rather than a parachute candidate who will never be in a position to have their record judged by constituents. So colleagues, I'd like to move the following motion. You will see it I've provided it in advance to the clerk, so you can call it up, but I think, Chair, I need to read it so that for the benefit of all. I'll be brief. Therefore, I move that the following actions be taken with respect to filling the vacancy of the office of Ward 13. A, John Fife Miller be appointed to the office of Ward 13 for the term commencing October 26, 2021 and ending November 15, 2022, pursuant to Section 261A of the Municipal Act 2001. B, the city clerk be directed to confirm the consent of John Fife Miller to be appointed to the office of Ward 13 and to confirm the individual's eligibility to hold the office of Ward 13 as set out in the Municipal Act 2001. C, subject to the confirmation of the matter set out in B above, the city clerk be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to appoint John Fife Miller to the office of Ward 13 in accordance with terms set out in A above to be introduced at the council meeting to be held on October 26, 2021. And finally, the report dated October 12, 2021, entitled Filling Vacancies on Municipal Council be received. That's my motion, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to second the motion presented by the mayor. And of course, I think his reasons with respect to the appointment versus an election, I agree with completely. In terms of the candidate, I guess I would add a couple other things that give me great confidence. When he's been the chair of our Committee of Adjustment, so he's familiar with the city processes. And looking back at the ranked ballot, and this is a real value of that system, which I think we're proud of. We can see that at his highest, Mr. Fife Miller had 48.5% of the unexhausted votes. If he had 1.6% more, we wouldn't be having this debate because he would be the sitting councillor. So that's about as close a finish as somebody could get. So I see that there's strong representational reason for him to be appointed because of those numbers. So for that reason, I'll support the appointment recommended by the mayor.
Any other comments, discussion, debate? No comments from visiting members. I see Councillor Pelosa. I'll go to you first, and then Councillor Helmer and Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess I really was just hoping for a broader discussion of what this appointment would look like today, especially recognizing now of Ward 6. If this is going to be the transparent process we follow of just the second place person gets it, some wards only had 2 people. For Ward 13, neither of the candidates had actually surpassed the 50% threshold, which was preferred by ranked ballots, but obviously not required. Personally, I have spoken with Mr. John Fife Miller on a couple occasions, neutral either way, but great to hear that so many people say wonderful things about him. And as always, we'll work diligently with whoever council or the community picks, should we end up going with the by-election. But really, to me, ranked ballots is the electorate getting to pick and rank as many people as they want to find potentially multiple candidates that have a similar ideology of what they're looking for, and avoiding vote splitting and people coming up the middle, and really a way to make politics more approachable and finding a clearer consensus. If people want to just start looking at the data, there was 32% of the people who selected former Councillor Kaya Vega didn't use a second choice. They came out strictly to support her in whatever her platform was. And for those second choice people who did make a select, actually Jonathan Hughes had a higher percentage off her ballots than John Fife Miller, if we want to start digging into the analytics and data on this one. My concern is if we're going to use ideally transparency in the same policy for Ward 6 when it comes time, there's just 2 candidates there. I'm not sure if anyone's reached out to Mr. Bloxham to see if he'd be interested in serving and able to step up. The election was over 1,000 days ago. Much has changed since then. I recognize some might say an election is costly, which it is. Great to hear from the clerks that there could be some cost savings if we're using equipment and software for potentially 2 by-elections at the same time. But really having a concern with the process and the discussion. It's great that some members of the community have already written in, but I also have members of the community writing in behind the scenes of, some people saying they would like to be considered and would not seek re-election come 2022. I have women writing me saying, how might they actually get involved and come forward, which is great. It's generated a lot of interest and people willing to serve the community. So really still listening to council's colleagues, considerations in this one, but I have some concerns about where we're at for transparency and process.
Thank you, Councillor. I will go to Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. My first preference, without a lot of constraints on the situation, is to have a by-election to replace people who've left council. I do think, given the timelines that are involved, having a by-election is quite tricky and leaves us with a rather short term in office. And so I'm not fully convinced that by-election is the right way to proceed, given where we are in the term of council. When it comes to appointments, my sort of next preference is to appoint somebody who has been on council before and really isn't interested in coming back to council for a long term. He isn't going to run again in the future. I think you get the benefit of experience. Somebody who's been on council can get up to speed on the current state of all the issues, but isn't an active political actor who's looking to stay on council beyond the rest of this term. And my question through the chair to the city staff is, for the vacancies that have occurred in London in the past, I'm familiar with some of them, but just in terms of the appointments that have been made, what has been the actual practice and the norm in London? I've looked around at some other cities about what they have done in terms of appointments, and there's not a lot of evidence of people appointing second place finishers of any kind.
I'll go to you, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair, we did take a look at the history in London, and for the most part, when there were vacancies, it was done by appointment. I haven't found a by-election, but I had very little time to do that research. But based on what I have found, it's been by appointment, and the process that had been undertaken was similar to what council did in 2014, where they asked for people to submit applications, and then council voted, had a slate of candidates to which they voted on with respect to the appointment. That is what I've found so far. For the most part, it's been an appointment process.
Councillor?
Just more specifically, I guess, what's being suggested here is that we appoint the second place finisher in the election. And do we have any record of doing that in London?
Through Madam Chair, sorry, Councillor Helmer. No, I haven't found anything that way. It's been through invitation for applications.
Thank you. So just in terms of my comments about what the mayor has suggested, I don't agree with the rationale for appointing the second place finisher, whether it's a first past the post election or a ranked ballot election. I just don't think it's compelling. I think what we should be doing in terms of the norm and how we should make an appointment, if we're going to make an appointment, is to follow that norm, which is to find somebody who's got experience, who's not interested in running in a future election, to fill in the rest of the term. I think there's a lot of agreement that we really would like to get the vacancy filled relatively quickly. I think there are some folks who still prefer a by-election, which obviously takes more time, but the appointment will get us there relatively quickly. I do think it's really important that we don't appoint people to positions so that the first time they're coming onto council is by appointment, and then they intend to run for re-election in the future. I think it gives people a very unfair advantage in the upcoming election. And I don't think it's a practice that we should start now. And I don't think the fact that we have much more information from ranked ballots about whose people preferences were is a sufficient justification for breaking away from that practice. The mayor described appointing somebody, I think he described that as a parachute candidate. And I think that's unfair. Russ Monteith was not a parachute candidate when he was appointed to fill Joni Baker's vacancy when she took over as mayor, when Mayor Fontana resigned. Russ Monteith did an excellent job filling in. And I think everyone knew he would do a good job because he was coming to the job with a lot of experience on council, and he could be a steady hand for the residents in Ward 5 when they needed somebody to fill in on short notice. And I think actually we have a good track record in London and many other municipalities in the province of Ontario of pulling people out of retirement, asking them to step forward and to serve for a short term and to do that work, which, as we all know, is not exactly all glory and excitement, but is a lot of tough work, especially in an election year when the election campaign will be distracting from much of the work that needs to be done. I think having someone who's not interested in running in the next election is a good idea. And I think that goes without saying, it goes for both Ward 13 and Ward 6, filling both those vacancies. We don't have an unlimited pool of people to ask, but I do think that that's the appropriate thing to do. I think it's really unfortunate for Mr. Fife Miller that there's this very strong push to have him appointed. When my expectation, I haven't heard from him, but my expectation is that he's still quite interested in running in the next election. And nothing to say whether he's a good or bad candidate. I think he's got a lot of fine qualities. But if that's the case, then I think appointing him would be a mistake. So I'm not going to support that motion if it comes to council. I will try and seek some clarity from Mr. Fife Miller because I certainly don't want to presuppose that he's not interested in running. But I would strongly prefer that we try and tap somebody who has been on council before and is not interested in continuing beyond the rest of this council term to fill that vacancy.
Thank you, Councillor Helmer. So I did have Councillor Turner next on my list, but I'm going to jump to Deputy Mayor Morgan since he's a member of the committee. So my order now is Deputy Mayor Morgan, then Councillor Turner, Councillor Hopkins, and Councillor Lewis.
Sorry, I needed a microphone. So I'll weigh in now, and then I'll maybe weigh in again later because I'm interested in hearing what colleagues say. And first and foremost, what I want to say is, I don't know how this is going to end up, but I do appreciate that there are multiple ways of looking at this. Like this is a very challenging situation for a sitting council to be in, and I think that I'm going to be respectful of all of the opinions that are shared today, and I think that there are multiple reasonable approaches to filling the vacancy. I do want to ask the clerk a question before I make too many comments, because not that cost is a huge factor when it comes to democracy, but it is a consideration in the report. And I heard the clerk say that it would be there would be savings by running 2 elections, and I wanted to clarify what you mean is it wouldn't be double your estimate in your report. You mean it would be, if it's 180 something, it would be 160 or 70 something. Is that correct? I mean 160 or 70 on top of that. Like it's not a doubling. If the clerk could just clarify that for me.
Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, sorry, I should have used the word some efficiencies would be achieved. So one election would be around 180,000, and the second one would be around 132,000 because there would be some efficiencies by using the same communications program, et cetera, things like that.
Perfect, thank you. I appreciate that clarification. So I'll comment on the comments so far. I think there's some comments about ranked ballots. There's some comments about appointments. I want to add some context. I know Councillor Pelosi gave some information about the the second choice candidates for Councillor Kayabaga. And indeed, she is true. Jonathan Hughes is, by a small margin, the second most preferred candidate, but Mr. Fife Miller is the third. For Mr. Fife Miller, it's actually Councillor Kayabaga who is the most preferred candidate. And when you look at all of the 1-2 combinations, all of the 1-2s in the entire election, it's Fife Miller and Kayabaga who are the most common 1-2. Kayabaga and Hughes are the second most common, and Fife Miller and Hughes is the third most common. So I think you can dig into this lots of different ways, but what it does say is that there is strong support for both former Councillor Kayabaga and Mr. Fife Miller in this election. That's why it was a very close election. And this idea that they were that there weren't voters who picked them both, there were lots. In fact, it was the most common thing that was done in the first round was picking the other person. So not for each individual candidate, but overall. I know that we're going to talk about Ward 6, and I'm pretty consistent in this. I didn't have a lot of time, but I looked at the results there, and I know, interestingly, Mr. Bloxham, who was the runner-up in 2018, received 30.5% of the vote. Now it was only a two-person race, and that's actually more than Councillor Squire got in 2014, which was 28.26, and that was a first-past-the-post election. So, these candidates have achieved, whether it's Mr. Fife Miller or Mr. Bloxham, significant portions of supports in the wards that they have sought to represent, and both of them have run multiple times. I'm inclined to support an appointment sooner rather than later. I agree with some of the comments made about both in the clerk's report as well as I think Councillor Hummer mentioned that I'm not too sure about the timing of the election. I think we kind of just get things rolling. We leave vacancies for long periods of time, and then people are potentially filing again. On that ability to file again, I think there's two arguments that will be made here. One is someone shouldn't be able to run again because we don't want to give an unfair advantage. The other argument is you want someone to be held to account by the electorate when they're exercising the duties of the office of councillor and representing those constituents. I think that reasonable people can see the logic in both of those. And I know that legally we can't forbid someone from running. And so I err on the side of not worrying about whether the person is going to run again or not. So I'm inclined to support the mayor's motion that he's put forward. I know there will likely be another debate at council. I'm interested in what other colleagues have to say, but that's certainly where my leanings are, and I wanted to be transparent about that in the debate. And I think I may have gone just a little bit long, but the councillor is looking at me, so thanks.
No, it's all good. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'll go to you, Councillor Turner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is going to be a fun debate. Obviously, a lot of opinions. It's been said a few times here. There's no wrong answer to this. The Municipal Act prescribes exactly what we can do. We can appoint or we can hold a by-election. So in either circumstance, both are allowed. The question that I've got a few questions for staff actually, but the question we need to ask ourselves is what reflects support to be in a chair at City Council? And how do you determine that? Because we really only have one tool to do that. And I guess my first question for staff was at the federal and provincial levels, for members of parliament and members of provincial parliament, can the government of the day choose to fill somebody's seat through an appointment, or do they have to go to a by-election if it's within outside of a certain time from the main election?
Madam Clerk.
Through Madam Chair, not claiming to be an expert on federal or provincial elections, but I believe it's by-election at that level of government.
Thank you. Second question is for you, Madam Chair, to the clerk. What's the purpose of the Municipal Elections Reserve Fund?
Madam Clerk.
Through Madam Chair, it is the monies that are set aside through the annual budget to hold elections.
Through you, Madam Chair, just for clarification, for regular elections or by-elections or both?
Through you, Madam Chair, all elections, whether it's a by-election or the regular election.
Thank you. Councillor Pelosa identified this, and Deputy Mayor Morgan had pointed at this as well, but could you confirm, I guess, of Councillor Kayabaga's first round ballots, I think 16.3% indicated Mr. Fife Miller as a second choice, and about 17.9% indicated Mr. Hughes as their second choice. Does that sound roughly correct?
Madam Clerk?
I apologize. I haven't looked at the election results in any detail. That sounds correct based on the last time I looked at it, yes.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I think that creates a really interesting argument, because I've been kind of fascinated to watch through Twitter and some of the discussions here even about some of the logic gymnastics associated with ranked ballots. Ranked ballots were meant to be able to identify an individual's first and second choice and third choice. It wasn't meant to identify population levels, second and third choice. That's already obvious and quite apparent in a first past the post system, who the second choice was, but it doesn't, that's the population's general support. It's not an individual's support. So when you see a significant difference in the level of support, so 100% of people who voted for Councillor Kayabaga voted for Councillor Kayabaga. And of those people, only 16.3% voted for Mr. Fife Miller. That would be like asking somebody who voted for a Conservative candidate, who's your second choice in the federal or provincial elections, and then seating that person. That's not really how we do it. We go to by-election. I think it's really important that whoever fills the seat has a mandate from people, not from us. And the other point in all of this is that as councillors, we're not allowed to remove anybody from council. So there can be violations of the council code of conduct. There can be violations of a number of things that might end up resulting in sanction or censure. But one of those sanctions can't be removal. The only thing that could result in removal is if they violated the terms of the Municipal Act or the Municipal Elections Act, or if the court removes them. But it's not left to this body to do that. And the reason for that, I'm going to argue, is that we're a political body. A lot holds in the balance on our votes, and there's weighting within council, and we see that on a pretty regular basis. So the reason we can't remove somebody from council is because we might see somebody as an impediment to an agenda, and a majority removes that person so that they're not in the way as much, because it's meant to make sure that the process of seating or unseating somebody is apolitical as possible. So the suggestion that we appoint somebody becomes somewhat political. That's my concern with this. I think there is certainly a place and a time to consider whether an appointment would happen, but we still have a year left in a term. That's a long time. That's not a short period of time. If we were to appoint somebody, I think it would be really important that that was a consensus candidate. And so I'm a little disappointed to see a name thrown right out of the gates, and a singular name, rather than, as the clerk had suggested, if we were to go forward with an appointment process, then we would have an application for names and we would consider those. And Councillor Helmer identifies some opportunities for us to look towards somebody who has the experience to fill the seat. Because if the argument is that we don't have enough time left in the term to elect somebody because they wouldn't be up to speed fast enough, that same thing holds for somebody who would be appointed. They wouldn't be up to speed fast enough if we were to pick somebody who didn't have the experience in council. So notwithstanding the candidates or the names that have been thrown around, there's no personality part to this, and for me, I think the names that have been put forward, they probably would do a fine job. But from a principal perspective, the only democratic way of seating somebody at council is through a by-election. I can't really see any other way that has the support of the people, that shows a mandate Because as much as you're going to argue that that ranked ballots show who that second place person should be, or who the next person to appoint should be, it doesn't do that at all. That's a big abomination of what ranked ballots mean and what they represent. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Just so people know, if you're coming to your 5 minutes, I'm just going to put my hand up rather than speak and interrupt you. But if you see my hand, it means I'm going to interrupt you soon. So I'm going to go to Councillor Hopkins next, and then Councillor Lewis.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for allowing me to make a few comments at your committee meeting today. I really do appreciate everyone's comments thus far. I am not in favor of the motion that's before the committee. And I guess one of the biggest reasons, or the main reason, why I'm not in favor of that motion is that I think it's very important that we do not politicize the next municipal election. And I think we're undertaking that process by supporting this motion. I agree, Deputy Mayor Morgan, there's different options that are available to us, and I think we should really look at them. Ideally, doing a by-election would probably be the best way forward. But if not, then we should look at appointments, and that should be taken out of our hands, given back to the clerk to seek experienced individuals that can take on the job right away. And for me, the most important thing here is that they not run in the next municipal election, because that will sway the next municipal election. We have 2 wards now that we have to consider that we not do that. I agree with Councillor Pelosa completely. We have to be as transparent as possible. And I would encourage each committee member to really have a good understanding on how we're going to be setting up a precedent here. I would encourage the committee to do what we've normally done in the past. And that is to go back and seek invitations to apply for the job. Like I said, the important criteria for me, or the important criteria for, there would be 2, that they be experienced, and maybe 3, they're ready to take on the job as soon as possible. But the most important thing is that they do not run in the next municipal election. So with that, Madam Chair, I know this is going to be a big debate at council. I'm looking forward to the debate at council again, but I would encourage the committee to really take a look at this, at the situation that we have with this ward and the next ward that we're going to have the same conversation with, and that we be as accountable and as transparent as we can, and take us out of the equation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hopkins. And now I will go to you, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to be part of this debate today. I will say, first of all, I want to pick up on a couple of comments that were shared. I actually disagree absolutely fundamentally at the base level with Councillor Turner's comparison, through you, Madam Chair, to the provincial and federal system. Those are partisan parliamentary systems where the seat count actually affects who forms government. Municipally, every member of this council is part of government. It is a much different scenario, and with the involvement of political parties and the partisanship that goes on there, very, very different reality. So you're comparing apples to oranges, in my opinion, if we are talking about what do the federal government do versus what the municipal government does. You know, we don't have cabinets here. We don't have parties and house leaders and all of those things that really, and in fact, we're in our 2nd consecutive minority government. So we see how a seat count could shift things, which does not happen at the municipal level because we're all part of that government. I also fundamentally think it's a really, really bad idea, and I thought it was a bad idea in in the 2010 term of council as well, with the appointment saying that somebody should fill a space that's not going to run again. Because I agree with Mayor Holder. I think that that person, if they choose to run again, will be held accountable for their record in their time in office. And I would prefer to have somebody who's going to be accountable to the constituents of their ward than somebody who can walk away at the end, no harm, no foul, and no accountability. Particularly when we're coming into a period of an annual budget update, assessment growth allocations in the new year, some very, very important things that we have to deal with. So I want somebody who's going to be accountable. If they choose not to run again, they can certainly do that. But if they do, I certainly wouldn't want to try and bar them from that legally or morally. And actually, I think it'd be wrong to deny the voters the chance to keep someone who they felt was doing a good job. You know, the Ward 13 residents have had, and of course, councillors are free to do this, but they've had 3 consecutive terms of council in a row where their councillor has sought higher office. I think if they have somebody that they like and choose to keep that person, that should be their choice at the ballot box, not ours as a council. And I also think that when we look back at this pattern of appointing former politicos, and I'm going to talk about the 2010 term of council specifically, where Mayor Beckler took over the mayor's chair from Mayor Fontana, and then Mr. Monteith was appointed in Ward 5 before he was ultimately replaced by the chair. I think it's important to remember that Councillor Beckler was chosen to be mayor by council itself, internally. And I think that's appropriately so, because a member of council has a mandate from at least a portion of their city. So their name was on a ballot. And so it was appropriate for her to be appointed from amongst council itself, because she had votes from the public. And former Controller Monteith actually would have had votes from residents in Ward 5 in his previous term as a controller. So again, while that may not have been a strong mandate, at least there was an expression of support for both of those candidates from people in the parts of the city affected. If we go to another councillor or a former councillor for Ward 13 right now, former Councillor Park, as we know, recently resigned from the LTC as she's left the city, so that would make her ineligible to serve. Councillor Kayabega, former Councillor Kayabega, of course, has moved on to be a member of Parliament. So we would have to go back a ways to somebody who has not held public office during the midst of a pandemic. The game has changed, whether we are thrilled with that or not. The roles and considerations that we've had to give in this term of council have been very different. When this comes to council, I will absolutely be supporting the mayor's recommendation, because one of the things that we can say about the name that's been put forward is Mr. Fife Miller has both on the Downtown London Association, the LDBA, as well as on our Committee of Adjustment, has continued to be involved in the life of the community during the pandemic in a way that's very closely tied to some of the things that we do here. As we know, just last month, we had an interim appointment to the LDBA because of all of the pressures downtown. It was felt that it was very important to fill that role at the time. And so we made Councillor Helmer the interim appointee to that board. The downtown cannot wait. And when we talk about a run-up to things, a by-election puts another 4 months in the way of even hitting the ground and getting up to speed, where an appointment can start within a couple of weeks. So I really encourage colleagues to consider these factors. Also consider that we have vacancies on agencies, boards, and commissions now that are going to have to be filled, and those shouldn't wait either. So I am fully supportive of this, and I will just share that I will probably be consistent on the Ward 6 consideration as well, because I think ranked ballots do show a mandate from the public. I don't know what the number was for Mr. Bloxham, but I know the number for Mr. Fife Miller was 2,186 votes. That's a mandate to me.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any other comments? Councillor Van Hulst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll just chime in. Excellent points made by my colleagues. So this is a situation that can be weighed many ways. I thought I'd add a couple other perspectives we may not have looked at yet. So I'll often mention there's 3 kinds of arguments you generally see here: representative, practical, and moral, if you like. So in terms of representation, I think there is a mandate for the appointment. The practical arguments, it is a pretty practical thing for us to do. It would be getting someone with a lot of connection to what we're doing right now in an office quickly. And then there's the arguments of what's fair. And I think those are the big ones that we're talking about now. So a concern is that if we appoint a candidate, they'll have an advantage over everyone else who runs next term. I'm not sure that that's altogether a valid point, or well, let's say it's a valid point. It may or not be the case. So for someone to be appointed to the council, it's much more difficult to run while you're busy doing council activities than maybe if you're not. The next thing to consider is that in terms of name recognition, if we appoint someone, they may not have a great advantage in terms of name recognition out there in the general public who doesn't pay a lot of attention to what we do. However, if we hold a by-election, the people who will have the greatest name recognition advantage are the ones who are able to put together a campaign very quickly. So there may be people who have been thinking about running next year, but may not be in a position to put together a campaign very quickly and get signs out there that people will start to recognize those names. And I also see that there's the idea of bringing somebody new in where we get some gain and because of the learning curve they have gone through. So the capacity that the appointees would have should they be elected again wouldn't be wasted. Whereas if we bring somebody back who has no intention of moving on, the time and the experience won't be so much of a value to the electorate. And finally, looking at this from electorate's point of view, I might prefer to see get a chance to see how the second place candidate in this past election does. So people will look and they'll have an opportunity to see how, in this case, Mr. Fife Miller performs. And then they'll be able to use that to inform their election, their choice next time. And I don't know if that it's a double-edged sword there, because they'll be looking to him for leadership and what he's accomplished. And if you only have a year, that's not a lot of time to be able to show some results. I know for me, last term, I did quite a bit got a lot going in the first year, and then it wasn't till maybe the latter half of the fourth year that all those things hit the ground. And I was able to say, look, I actually did something. So there's some reasons why a person who would be appointed for this term would have a little bit of an advantage. There's reasons why they would have a little bit of a disadvantage, but those advantages and disadvantages do exist. So I think those are the points I would make about that. Again, this is a bit of a dilemma for us. And so I'm sure there'll be more of a debate at council again. But I think at this point, I'm still comfortable making the appointment. And so that's how I'll be voting.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other discussion on this? Councillor Van Hulst, I wonder if you would take the chair for a moment.
Absolutely, Madam Chair, you have the floor.
Thank you. So we're at this weird sort of fork in the road, and we're here because if we had a little bit more time, absolutely, we would go with a by-election. If we had a little bit less time, as they did in 2014, there would be no choice but to appoint. And we are at sort of a crossroads. Absolutely, by-election is the most democratic option. Absolutely, the by-election would award the person that finally fills either of those seats with a mandate from the electorate. But unfortunately, I think there are a number of things against a by-election. Is democracy truly served when very few of the electorate shows up to vote? And already we know from statistics that Ward 13 is generally has a lower voter turnout than some of the other wards. So if we already are working with a lower voter turnout, and then it is even further lower, there's a concern from me on that. Also, you know, there is voter confusion, there's voter fatigue. There will have been, by the time October 2022 rolls around, there will have been a lot of elections in the City of London. So I do think that while it is the most open, the most honest, the most transparent way to fill this seat, it may not be the most practical. And unfortunately, we do sometimes have to deal with practicalities. Having said all that, I do not support the mayor's motion. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that this is the point of ranked ballots. This is absolutely not the point of ranked ballots. Ranked ballots are meant to give the winning candidate a strong mandate from the voters in that ward. That is what ranked ballots are for. There are other benefits to ranked ballots. Councillor Pelosa listed some of them, and absolutely those are part of the values and part of the reasons why I voted in favor of implementing ranked choice voting here in the City of London. But it is not to find a second place candidate just in case the seat becomes vacant. And when you counted up all of the votes after all of the ballots, and I think there were 8 or 9 ballots in total for Ward 13, the second place candidate only had 38% of the vote. So that means 42% of the people, am I doing my math right? If I'm doing it wrong, but there was a larger percentage of voters in Ward 13 that chose other candidates over this person. And others have said that this is a fine person. I have met him. He is a fine person. He has fine qualities. He has qualifications. That does not mean we take 70 letters that people have written and used 70 letters from 70 people out of more than 20,000 people in the ward, and 70 people get to sway this council to determine who's going to fill this vacant seat. That is the opposite of transparent and open. People have commented that this person would be accountable for their voting record. I submit that the opposite is true there as well. So there is an advantage to incumbency. It is spoken about a lot. You have a certain amount of name recognition as a sitting councillor. And in the short time that this person would hold office, they really don't have a record that they'd be running on. People in this chamber today have at least 3 years right now, and by the time the election rolls around, almost 4 years of our votes, our public statements on the record for our voters to determine whether or not they want to return us to office. This person will not have that. So they will have the advantage of incumbency, but not the handicap that comes with incumbency. So I do believe that there would be an unfairness in the next municipal election in 2022 in Ward 13 to award this to somebody who intends to run again. I think we are in a pandemic, as Councillor Lewis pointed out. We are in a period of uncertainty. There has been a lot that has hit this council over the last month, let alone the last 18 months. I believe having a former councillor or somebody with municipal experience come in with hopefully what would be a consensus from this council, would be a steady hand for the few remaining months of this term of office. I believe we can ask somebody to commit to not running in the 2022 municipal election. I agree with Deputy Mayor Morgan that we can't hold that person to that, but that would be their record. They would run in 2022 and they would face the electorate saying, I made a promise not to run again and I'm breaking that promise. Please elect me. That would be a viable record for that person to run on, and they would have to overcome that. We have a precedent here in the City of London. We have done this before, and we have done it pretty much the same way every time. I believe that we should continue with that. It has served the City of London well. What do we do with our advisory committees and with boards and commissions when we make citizen appointments? We don't just come forward to a meeting, one person making a motion, and not consider any other applicants to those positions. That's not the way we do vacancies on boards and commissions and advisory committees. And I don't believe for this very, very important position that we should take that approach now. So that's my position on this. I believe that we should continue with what we've done in the past. We should seek applications. We should look for somebody that has had municipal experience or experience on this council. I think we have a few retired members that would serve this council well, would serve the citizens of London well. And I believe that we can get a commitment from people to not run in the 2022 election. So those are my comments, Mr. Presiding Officer, and I'm happy to take the chair back whenever you're ready to yield.
I'm happy to return that. The chair noting that Councillor Lewis has raised his hand to make comment.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Councillor Cassidy. I just, I pulled up the numbers while you were chatting. So just to confirm, the numbers that you were referencing on the 7th round of the ballot, of course, well, that's the last round where there were two candidates, 40.6% had ranked Councillor Kaya Bega as their first choice. 38.25 had ranked Mr. Fife Miller as their first choice. And I would just add to one other point of math here, because it was brought up earlier, the most common first, second choices across the city. Councillor Turner, I believe it was, referenced that Mr. Fife Miller had 16% of Councillor Kaya Bega's alternate choices. That was for second choice, but I will share the math on the second and third choices combined. In terms of those who ranked Mr. Fife Miller, who chose Councillor Kaya Bega, former Councillor Kaya Bega first, we have 26.2%, and we have 27.7% who chose Mr. Hughes either as second or third. Because we could rank three candidates, I thought it was valuable to have the second and third totals supplied. So I'll just share those with you now and wrap up on that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other debate or discussion on this item? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor. It's been moved and seconded, and I will call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 3-2.
And that takes us then back to item 5, which is the vacancy in number 6. Is that correct? Yes. So how do you want to proceed with item 5.1, I guess it is? Mr. Mayor.
So if we're talking about, just to be clear, we're talking about the announcement by Councillor Squire today of his determination to resign the seat. Is that correct?
So we already moved that we declare his seat vacant. There is a report from the city clerk that we received by email at the beginning of the meeting. How does committee wish to handle that report? Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yes, given the committee had a divided vote, and I think there's going to be a debate at council on this. I think there's two options for committee to pursue. They can make the same recommendation that the mayor put on the floor earlier to say, let's do this one by appointment too. Obviously, nothing can happen until it's approved by council to declare it vacant. I also know, given this is going to council, someone at council could do the same thing. And given we're going to have a debate, and we don't want to get ahead of things, and there will be a council decision. I'm pretty comfortable either way, either just leaving it and taking care of it at council or providing a recommendation from committee here. So I think those are the two options before us, and I'd leave it to colleagues if they want to move one.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm comfortable referring this to our next council meeting for this standpoint. I think gives us a chance to reflect on the bombshell news we just heard with respect to the council from Ward 6. And I think from there we can determine the appropriate next steps. But I think what we have done in the case of Ward 13 is we had a series of steps. It came before us in committee, then council declared it vacant. Now we've got this meeting, which will then be confirmed or not in terms of determining next steps at our next council meeting. But it's a process, and I think we all respect process, and I'm very mindful of all the inputs we've all heard from colleagues as to different ways we can handle this issue. So I think we all want to reflect on this, and I'm going to suggest that what we do, having accepted and from our standpoint recommending to council that the seat be declared empty, is that we refer the balance of this to council for its consideration with the vacancy, and it may well be that it's in the subsequent council meeting, or committee meeting, excuse me, that we determine it, so that we take the same steps that we've taken with this and the thoughtful consideration. We may well, as a committee, do something somewhat similar, but I don't know until council's decided what that similar is yet. So I think, to be fair, I don't want us to prejudge what that determination is going to be. So I'm comfortable having, if the deputy mayor is suggesting this be referred to council for consideration to accept the resignation or declare the seat vacant, I'm prepared to second and support that direction of next steps.
Okay, Councillor Pelosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Everyone's been speaking today about such urgency to fill these seats, move forward. It's only a year to the next election cycle. And transparency and process. A little bit surprised in honoring Councillor Squire. It's important to do committee work at committee and not council. That I'm surprised that we wouldn't move forward with the same step we just did for 13 here as a decision at committee to move it forward to council with committee's recommendation of the same transparent process of how to fill Ward 6 vacancy and let it be a discussion at council, recognizing I voted against the Ward 13 direction committee just took. I would certainly vote against that as well for consistency for Ward 6, but considering what we just did, I think it would be appropriate to have that discussion and move that forward to council for the full discussion and keep the package of transparency and process as one piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yeah, I think referral is appropriate. If Councillor Pelosi wanted to move Mr. Bloxham, I'd second that. But I also said I want to be consistent. So if council overturns the decision of this committee at council and goes a different way, that's what I want to use to fill Ward 6. So I think declaring it vacant, referring Part B to council allows us to deal with the debate we just did at council first, make a decision, and then we can take the second step of filling it. That's my preferred option, but I certainly respect what Councillor Pelosi is saying.
Any other comments or discussion? So it was kind of interesting that we had a seconder before we had the mover for referral.
Yeah, I'd move referral of the Part B to council.
That's perfectly fine, Mr. Mayor. I often wonder why people say, I'd be ready to do that. Just do it. I don't care. If you're ready, then do it now. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Morgan. Any other comments? Councillor Van Holst?
I'll support the referral, Madam Chair.
Okay, so we have a motion to refer the filling of the vacancy of Ward 6 to the next council meeting. It's been moved and seconded. So I'll call the question.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed. 4.
Takes us to only the confidential items, and they are listed on the public agenda. There are 2 items, and they're both land acquisition items. So I will look for a motion to move in camera. Moved by Deputy Mayor Morgan, seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Thank you. I'll call the question. We can do a show of hands on that. All those in favor? I see everyone in council chambers, and I see Councillor Pelosa.
That motion's carried.
And give us a second.